Hello to you all and welcome to the pitcast by us here at the Pit Crew Online. From the fans, for the fans. Today we are discussing the Italian Grandprix, which happened over the weekend, along with a few other things, but we'll get to that. To discuss it with me, I have, first of all, our Deputy Editor, James.
Hi, Luca. It's good to be back on the podcast.
It's very good, and congratulations on your new role with Williams. I'm sorry. All right, and
I wish.
Secondly, we have our IndyCar correspondent, Adam.
Hi guys, thank you very much for having me back. It's good to be back.
It is indeed, and I am your host, Luca. So I just sort of touched upon it there. The Williams news. We won't go too deep into this. I know that the likes of Aaron, Warren, and Simon really want to dedicate a whole episode to it, so I'll give them the leeway there. But I do want to just briefly touch upon the fact that this weekend was the last time that the Williams family was directly involved with Formula One, and it is very sad because times are obviously changing. Williams are not going to be. We're never going to really improve exponentially in that time, and it's a business. They have to keep it running, do what's best for the team, and they've bowed out. And I have so much respect for the Williams family, and even though that their team has kind of gone down in the last few years, it's a special team, and I hope that we see the name involved in F1 for years to come. James, if you'd like to just throw out there any quick notes about the news about it being the last race for the Williams family.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock when we saw the news. Was it Thursday morning it was announced? I was surprised. To be honest, I didn't expect them to stay sort of. I know that Doralton said they wanted to keep them in place, but I didn't expect them to stay maybe beyond the end of the year. But I was surprised it was so soon. And it was I did get quite emotional towards the end of the race, to be honest. I saw the images of Claire on the pit wall before the race as well, seeing her guide Latifi out of the garage. That was quite nice. It is a real shame to have lost them. But I'm glad that they went on their own terms, that it wasn't just that they weren't forced out by the new owners. I'm glad that they took the decision to step down now, and it was their decision.
I mean, funnily enough, we were actually recording the Belgian Grand Prix debrief and talking about the new owners coming in and thinking about what capacity the Williams family would still play. And I was expecting them to keep on Claire Williams in the sort of same way that you have Gene Haas and Gunther Steiner at the Haas F1 team, and then you've got Zach Brown and Andreas Seidel. But Claire has decided to step away. And I mean, Adam, I have to ask you this, is the fact that she's obviously been the deputy team principal for her own father's team, and I can imagine there was always a bit of a negative feeling regarding leaving behind the very thing that your father had dedicated his whole life to. And I hope that Claire Williams never felt that she had ever let the team down, but I have so much respect for her. She's done what she can and left on her own terms.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'd add to that is, I think Claire Williams has gone and taken a lot of flack for the things she's done over the past few years. I think I've had numerous conversations with fellow, F1 fans or people interested in the sport who sort of put a lot of the focus of the team's downfall in recent years to her, which, may or may not be true. But I think there's something stoic, really, about what she's done and what they've done in F1 across the past couple of decades, being one of really the only last independent manufacturers in F1. I think it now that was the last of the British-owned teams, I think, now that Dalton has acquired Williams. And I think we forget how much pressure and how much amount of work it really needs, and the amount of funding that it needs for a modern F1 team to run. And for them to run it the way they did, for the amount of years they have, I think hats off to them, really. And let's not forget, they enjoyed recent success with the podiums with Felipe Massa and Valtteri Bottas. So they have done well, obviously not over the past couple of years, but I think it's a little bit of shame that they didn't ride it, they weren't able to ride it through into the new regulations where potentially it could have become more of a viable business for them. But like you said, I think they've got nothing to be ashamed of for what they've done in this sport. And I think we'll remember Williams in a positive light, really, for everything they've done. So, yeah.
I mean, we're talking almost as if like the name Williams is going to disappear. I mean, it may as well, considering that Frank and Claire have left. But are they going to? Is the name Williams actually going to remain in F1 beyond this year? Is it a case now that when Force India had to go into administration, they were acquired by Racing Point. They sort of put that bracket on there and then kept that until the end of the year, and then just became Racing Point on its own. I mean, I would hope that Williams don't disappear, but it might happen. Knowing how much things age like milk on this podcast, it will probably happen.
I think that Doralton would be a little bit stupid getting rid of the Williams name, to be honest, because it's, with the Force India thing, Force India had been around for 10, 11 years, but make a point it didn't have that big a reputation, whereas Williams is the third most successful team in F1 history. Even if just from a marketing perspective, I think that would be a calamitous own goal if they dropped that name for something brand new that didn't have that reputation.
Just before I get to you there, Adam, and a little interesting note, when 2014 rolled around and the drivers got to pick the roll numbers, it just so happened that their two drivers that year, Felipe Massa and Valtteri Bottas, so happened to pick the two numbers that would make up the year that Williams first entered Formula One, 1977. Anyway, Adam, you said you wanted to say something there.
No, just sort of rolling on from what James said. It's they would be stupid to drop the Williams name because the Williams name carries such weight behind it and such marketing potential as being such a historic name in the sport. And really, the only alternatives that maybe a company like that can go down is if they partner with potentially another works team like Racing Point did with Aston Martin or like Renault did with Alpine. I know Toro Rosso, when they changed their name to AlphaTauri, the thinking behind that was the fact that AlphaTauri is Red Bull's is their clothing
brand.
Yeah, that's right. So that sort of gives weight to their, or gives more sheds more light on obviously that brand. But otherwise, Williams still carries magnificent weight behind it, and with that name, they'll be able to attract sponsors well into the future. So yeah, they should keep with that.
Yeah, I mean, since we are going to obviously be talking about AlphaTauri in this episode, if you haven't watched the Grand Prix, I don't know what you're doing here. Go watch it. I do. Part of me always wishes, because I love the name Toro Rosso, it's so brilliantly simple, that they just sort of bought an Italian clothing brand and then put the Toro Rosso name on that. But AlphaTauri, it's the star constellation. We touched on it in the last episode. I don't know why I'm waffling. Okay, right. Since you did mention it there, Alpine. Renault, as of next year, are going to be racing under the Alpine brand. An F1 team principal, Cyril Abiteboul, he recently came into the position of Alpine something, I can't. CEO, president, I don't know. It's all just titles to me.
Boss.
Boss, yeah, thank you. We'll go with boss. Alpine itself will become almost like AMG is to Mercedes-Benz. It's an in-house sports brand, which is what Renault Sport used to be, and now it's going to be Alpine. And it won't really change much. I mean, it'll cause some confusion because imagine you've got the likes of, Ocon and Gasly and whoever's driving one of the Alfa Romeos next year, racing with whoever's driving an Aston, like the Alfa, the Alpine, and the Aston. That's good. And another thing I'm a bit peeved about is that we're losing the iconic Renault yellow. It'll be in blue, unfortunately. Yeah. Which, considering the nostalgia about Alonso racing in the blue, I think a lot of people will be happy about that. I like having all these different colours. So do we have anything to say about Alpine? Who wants to go first with that? James?
Seemed like a bit of an interesting decision. Because I remember when Renault came back as a works team, they said, or back in 2016, they said they wanted to come back as a works team because they weren't getting the promotion for the Renault brand, just being an engine supplier. And then they pulled out of Formula E when they had quite a successful team, gave that over to Nissan so that they could focus on Renault in Formula One. So I'm a little bit surprised that they've now rebranded it as another brand. Part part of me wonders if it's a bit of a kind of shrewd, if they see it as a bit of a kind of win-win, because at the moment where Renault isn't doing as well, you know, if the team doesn't improve, then the Renault reputation isn't damaged and Alpine's reputation isn't as big, so it doesn't take as big a hit. Whereas if Renault succeeds, then, or if Alpine succeeds rather, going to do that a lot, then it helps grow the Alpine brand. There's a cynical part of me as well that wonders if they're thinking, we've got Fernando Alonso coming in next year. If he's going to start dragging the team's name through the mud on team radio, if the car's not good, then would we rather it's not the Renault name? But I doubt it's just done for Fernando Alonso.
Oh yeah, imagine if that was the only reason. Adam, got anything to add to that?
I mean, James, you summed it up pretty well there. I think you're right. It is a win-win situation for them. You know, a part of me thinks, you know, is Alpine as a brand going to attract the same amount of attention and spotlight, revenue, sponsorship that Renault can? Obviously, Renault is still a part of them and they're still partnered with them and they'll still have the Renault engines. So there'll always be that Renault aspect there. But yeah, there's a weird sort of, you know, thing about, you know, there was this fairy tale return for Fernando Alonso to the Renault brand and it's not going to be Renault next year. That seems a little bit strange to me, but I don't think I've got anything more to add to that really. I think it's going to be interesting having a new name in Formula One, but it's certainly obscure and certainly the younger fans may not recognize what the brand, you know, but hey, it's always fun having something new. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I know Alpine do make their own like cars and they are a much smaller scale. It is curious because like, I think James hit the nail on the head. It's because Renault aren't at the front, they don't want to sort of lower their stock by, you know, Fernando Alonso, GP2 engine. Wow!
Well, it's still going to be a Renault engine, so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but then
GP2 bodywork.
Yeah, well, Renault do supply the engines for Formula 2, so it's not exactly out of the realm. Right, now we can talk about the race itself. And if I just harken back to like 5 days ago on the Belgian Grand Prix debrief, I asked the likes of Simon, Aaron, and Ray, do we think Daniel Ricciardo could get a podium? Maybe, just maybe. Bloody hell, that was a hell of a podium, that. Let's go through the beats one by one. It was a race of two halves, quite literally. So It was the first part of the race. It looked like it was going to be an easy win for Hamilton. But then Magnussen happened. And oh man, there's so much to unpack here, and we're 10 minutes into the podcast, so I reckon that we'll 10 or 15 minutes into the podcast, so I reckon we'll have enough time. So Magnussen broke down, and I think the reason why what happened. He was in like the marshalling sector that was closest, that has the pit lane entrance, and that's why they closed the pit lane when they did. And obviously Hamilton being caught out by that, not being much leeway, not enough time to react, and he was looking at his switches. He went in along with Giovinazzi later on, but he's less relevant. Sorry, Gio. They ended up getting 10-second penalties when oh man, that just really flipped the race on its head. There was Gasly coming in just before the safety car. Then the safety car happened. Hamilton and Giovinazzi got in, but they weren't allowed, so they got the penalty for it. And then everyone else, apart from Stroll, came in when the safety car was out, and Stroll looked like he'd really sort of screwed that, but then the red flag saved him. So I've talked enough here. James, do you want to take this, like the crazy action that happened as a result of flipping the race on its head?
Yeah, so then, gosh, what happened after that? So then they had the safety car restart, and then Leclerc went straight into the barriers. Was that a brake failure like Vettel, or
no?
I can't remember what happened with that.
He just literally lost the rear going into Parabolica, and he almost corrected himself, but he couldn't. He just went straight into the wall.
Yeah, I think that was a moment where I was making a cup of tea and then turned around like a second after it happened.
Wait, you were making a cup of tea as soon as the safety car restart happened.
It was bad timing. I didn't realise the safety car was ending. I thought
We are talking with the guy who goes for toilet breaks.
That's true.
Yeah. And we outed you in one of the episodes, and we were like, "Sorry, James." Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So Leclerc went into the barriers and they red flagged the race. Wasn't red flagged for too long while they repaired the tyre barriers. But then obviously when the race restarted, Hamilton had to take his 10-second stop go. And really that was the worst time for him to take it, because obviously the field was still bunched up after the restart. So whereas before he might have just dropped down sort of to the back of the top 10, he dropped right to the back of the field. He was
3 seconds behind last.
Yeah, long way off. And even with the Mercedes, that's a big job to come back through there. So you ended up with the incredible sight of Gasly leading a Grand Prix from Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll. And, you know, you never see that. I don't think you'll ever see that again unless you get this kind of 1 in 1,000 chance.
Yeah, these. I remember one of the last times they red flagged the race. It really just made it manic, and it was another, one where you had a lot of straight line performances to sort of help dictate a lot of overtaking. It was Baku, and coincidentally enough, that was Lance Stroll's first podium. And then obviously he went and got his second as well in a race exactly just like that. Adam, got anything to say regarding the beats of this Grand Prix?
So what I want to know is, when Magnussen rolled his car to the right just before the pit lane entry, what I want to know is why Magnussen didn't just kind of sail into the pit lane and just sort of cruise into there, as opposed to just parking on the entrance. Or alternatively, why didn't the marshals push that car backwards into that little partition in the wall? Because to me, it was really strange at first seeing the marshals push that car into the pit entry. And I'm not complaining. We got a brilliant race out of it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just curious. And I just also want to know, is that the first time we've seen the pit lane actually close to drivers in F1, or has there been some time recently?
Well, okay, so this is something I did want to discuss. By the way, the little access point that Magnussen could have rolled back into with the marshals, that looked too small for an F1 car, and plus there didn't look to be any sort of unless I think what they do with a lot of retired cars in Grand Prix is sort of just keep them there. But yeah. I think that still very inconvenient. So it was much easier to roll it to the pit lane. Maybe Magnussen's car just sort of was engine braking when it was failing anyway. But yeah, regarding safety, the pit lane closing during safety car periods, that was a very bad thing back in the early days. Well, I say early days, pre-2009. Shows how old I am. And then, so basically, back in those days, you had refueling. Which was very awkward. If you were approaching the end of your stint, a safety car calls out. It was called out. And back in those days, you were not allowed to enter the pit lane, or you'd get a stop-go penalty, which is very awkward considering that it would be a safety car afterwards and you just drop to the back of the field. But the alternative to that is running out of fuel. I remember watching the 2008 season review at the first race. Alonso was having to save so much fuel, and it was just, I can imagine how stressful that would have been. Then they got rid of that rule for 2009, and then 2010, the year afterwards, they banned refueling. So I personally am of the belief, because I remember in Russia last year, both the Mercedes really benefited when Vettel stopped his car. They leapfrogged to Leclerc, and as much as I'm okay with that result, I still feel like it's a bit BS. Even as the biggest Hamilton fan, and Hamilton ended up winning that race, I still very much believe that the rule needs to be changed. It's the first time in a long time I seem to remember there being a pit lane closing because of a car out on track. I do think, obviously, that was because of Magnussen. It was a very rare exception. But in terms of how we can enact that rule in the future, I do seriously believe that there needs to be for virtual safety cars, we didn't have one in this race, but for virtual safety cars, you do have to definitely have the pit lane closed. It's not like you're going to run out of fuel. It's unless you have solid evidence that you had a slow puncture or a definite puncture, then you're not allowed to go in, basically. this it seems to have, that Mercedes were caught out, weren't they? They were completely caught out by that, blindsided. Apparently, there was someone in Brackley who noticed what had happened on their little monitor whilst everyone at the track. Obviously, they didn't in time, and that's what cost Hamilton the race. But yeah, to be fair on them, we haven't seen this in a long time, and I'm amazed, frankly, that. Go on, Adam.
I'm inclined to give them sympathy, but the fact that they were one of only two out of the entire field who made that mistake makes me a little bit, skeptical as to how tricky it was to get it wrong. I mean, I remember, however, countering that point, I did remember hearing that Carlos Sainz was almost about to head into the pit lane, but was told at the very last minute by his engineers to not enter as the pit lane was closed. So, yeah, I mean, I guess a few more people could have got it wrong. You're right, as it is a very irregular thing to occur in Formula One, and the drivers may or may not have been aware of this rule. But the thing I'm thinking of is, why wasn't Hamilton looking to all of those boards and those?
Apparently, he was looking at his wheel. He was doing some switches. And also, I mean, Mercedes, they did have very little time. They didn't have a big window. Alfa Romeo, on the other hand, had a huge one. And I think, was Giovinazzi ahead of Raikkonen at that point?
I can't remember. But yeah, they certainly had a lot more time than Mercedes to react to it.
Exactly. So if anything, I kind of don't give them as much sympathy, but it's still some, because obviously it's not something that we see often. So they very much were caught out by it all. So yeah, that's so that was the catalyst to an insane result, and I'm still amazed by what happened. I have a friend called Alkia, right? I'm going to send her this now that I've mentioned her. She's a huge Gasly fan, so big, and she was very obviously worked up when Red Bull dropped him at the end of the middle of last year, and then Gasly loses his best friend the first race he has after being demoted. He's had a whirlwind couple of months, and during that last few laps he was driving immaculately, if that's the right word. I might have misused that word. And holding off Carlos Sainz right to the end, and taking his first victory, and winning with AlphaTauri, who were Toro Rosso, when Sebastian Vettel won at the same track 12 years ago. I say that with some doubt. I feel like I don't know maths. Hang on a second.
I'm just 2008.
No. I noticed you have a cat on your lap.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The pit crew cat has arrived.
Oh,
what's her name?
Dolly.
Fresh. I only see the tail. Right, where was I? Keep that in, Aaron. Feel free. Yeah. Okay, so the fact we very rarely see these kind of results, and I feel we have got to just sit up and everyone's happy. Mercedes fans, Ferrari fans, Red Bull fans. It's I remember back in 2009. When Rubens Barrichello won his first race in 5 years, the whole pit lane was out there cheering for him. It was one of the most popular wins in F1, and couldn't have happened to a more deserving guy. He's been through it all, and to come out with a victory in the most unlikely circumstances, you just got to sit up and take note. So, Adam, do you want to take this first?
So I think you've picked a good person to come on, as I'm a massive Carlos Sainz fan, and I'm just going to be heaping praise on Carlos Sainz this entire podcast. So,
you know what? It's completely fine. I mean, I was conflicted as to if I wanted to win anyway because I want McLaren. But
as a Carlos Sainz fan, I followed him since 2014, since his World Series Renault 3.5 days, in which he did have that title fight with Pierre Gasly right down to the last race in Jerez. And I remember thinking back then, my God, these two guys are possibly destined for Formula One. But, unfortunately, Sainz got the jump on Gasly at the time, replacing Jean-Eric Vergne. And it took Gasly those few more years to get into Formula One. And I feel like those two their destinies are sort of intertwined. There's like, not only did they have that magnificent title fight then, but both of their podium opportunities have come from both of each other, really. They've both been on the top, not the top set, they've both been on the podium together when they've both got the opportunity. It's very strange. But yeah, as you know, similar to Gasly's story, it's almost like a massive kick in the teeth for Red Bull, isn't it? That both of their Red Bull Junior drivers were both fighting it out for the win in front of their works drivers. And, Sainz went through a very similar period of turmoil where he was almost, I wouldn't say he was completely shunned, but he was just completely overshadowed by the brilliance of Max Verstappen in that Toro Rosso in the 2015 days. Narrowly, though, Sainz out-qualified Verstappen in 2015. So it was a very, not a black and white picture in that season, but due to that time, he sort of became a bit of an underdog and a bit of a sort of undervalued driver in the paddock. And when he got his move to Renault, not many people really counted on him to do well. Not many people thought he'd do well against Nico Hülkenberg. And no, he didn't actually beat Nico Hülkenberg that year, which didn't do his credit any favors that year. So when he got to move to McLaren, it was even more strange to think that he would do well up against the likes of Lando Norris. But, last year was a revelation for me as a fan, seeing how well Sainz drove in races like Budapest, Japan, Brazil, where he just put in so many consistent, fantastic performances that really catapulted his career to the point where he was able to be within a shout of getting a drive for Ferrari, which is a little bit of an interesting point of topic now. But carrying that form on, this season for Sainz has been littered with reliability and bad luck issues, which I don't think really have represented his actual pace this year. We think back to the tyre blowout at Silverstone Race 1 and his magnificent qualifying in Spa where he didn't get to start the race, and the three slow pit stops at Styria, Budapest and Silverstone Race 2 that have really hemorrhaged points, championship points for him. So for him to come to this race after what really must be a ridiculous amount of mental turmoil for him, to come back in that fashion and to really, let's think about the start for a second. That start for Carlos, where he overtook Valtteri Bottas at the beginning of the race and was pretty much, he was clear in second place, which I don't think many people would have expected. And kudos to McLaren for producing a car that really was the second fastest car this weekend. But really, Sainz was P2 for most of this race, and had not the red flag or safety car happened, it could well have been a P2 anyway for Carlos. And that entire escapade with the red flag and the safety car, it really hampered his opportunity there and put him all the way back down to, I think, 6th and 7th. So the way he fought back then to get all the way back to the position to fight for the win, which came down to 0.4 of a second to Gasly, I can't sing this guy's praises anymore, because yesterday I was so proud of what he accomplished that day. And even though he didn't win, I was still happy of the performance he put in. And likewise, I was happy for Gasly and how he did that day. So yeah, as a Formula One fan, as any fan, I don't think anyone can be disappointed that we essentially got given what we've always wanted, which is hard competitive racing, which we haven't got recently. I think I'll stop there.
No, it's fine. You do make a good point, though, regarding Sainz and Gasly's pack, because I think the reason why Sainz got the call up ahead of Gasly, not because he won the championship ahead of him in 2014, but because Gasly had only just gotten onto the Red Bull program for that season, and Sainz had been a long-time investment for them. But I want to ask you this, James. Both being Red Bull juniors, they have obviously gone through the motions, seeing how hard it is to be in Red Bull, and now they've essentially just put all their weight behind Verstappen, and they kind of just neglected a lot of their other drivers. So, here's a good fact that either of you might find interesting. Max Verstappen went from racing go-karts in 2013 to winning a Formula One Grand Prix in 2016, right? Pierre Gasly was Formula Renault Euro Cup champion 2013, and then GP2 champion 2016. In between the time that Verstappen graduated from karts to becoming an F1 Grand Prix winner, Gasly never won. Gasly never won a race, and it wasn't until 2016 at Silverstone, even though he'd done like World Series in 2014 and then a couple of years in GP2, Gasly's really been through the thick of it there. And then when he gets to F1, he's called up to Red Bull ahead of Sainz, which is important because Sainz was still Red Bull contracted and he went off to McLaren on his own terms. Gasly then obviously got demoted. You got to think now, seeing how Sainz is doing at McLaren, because I was guilty. Adam's going to hit me for this, but I was kind of guilty before 2019 of thinking that Sainz was not up to much. But I think it definitely took him breaking away from that Red Bull environment to excel, and he really has. Do you think Gasly needs that as well? Because I really hope I don't check my phone and see that Gasly's been given the call up to Red Bull for the Tuscan Grand Prix.
Yeah, I think it's something that I know a lot of people have said after this win, that he's almost guaranteed the Red Bull drive for next year. And in a way, I'd kind of like to see him get that chance again. I'd like to see Red Bull say, actually, you know what, he's really improved. He deserves this shot again. But on the other hand, I don't know, seeing Gasly through his junior career as well. I remember in F2 in 2015, I think it was, he, after doing a handful of races for Caterham at the end of the year before, he joined Dams, and he was sort of touted as one of the championship favourites, you know, being a Red Bull junior, being very highly regarded, being with a team that had won titles. And he's kind of nowhere through the season. Like, he had a couple of podiums, but he missed out on a lot of wins
10th.
through a lot of mistakes. Yeah, he had quite a few retirements, I think. And to be honest, when I watched that, I hadn't really heard of Gasly before, and I sort of saw him and thought, I don't really see it. I don't really see what Red Bull sees. And then the next year he went to Prima, and something just seemed to click into place for him, and he just went off on this title campaign against Antonio Giovinazzi, and you know, it was like seeing two different drivers. And I wonder if he's one of those drivers a bit like Sebastian Vettel and maybe Lewis Hamilton, that when they've got that environment around them that seems to give them what they need, it manages to just unlock that extra bit that they need. But when he's in an environment that's not quite working for him, that really works against him. So there's a part of me that, you know, I wonder if going to Red Bull, I don't know, when he's got this momentum, I don't want him to stay at AlphaTauri for the next couple of years and stall, but I also don't want him to go back to Red Bull and it be the wrong environment, and it kind of undoes the momentum. There's not really anywhere else he would go other than Red Bull if he was to move up the grid. To be honest, in a dream scenario, and again, Adam might hit me for this one as well, I'd love to see him at Ferrari if Carlos Sainz didn't work out there, because, you know, Gasly and Leclerc's friendship is so strong. I'd love to see those two in a team together. Whether that would actually work out, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know if I'd like to see him get that opportunity at a top team again, because he thoroughly deserves it. I just really hope it's the right opportunity and the right team.
Adam, you look like you're itching to talk.
Yes. I'm going to pose a question to you, and it's going to be 2023 Pierre Gasly for Alpine. What do we think?
Are we talking about him as a replacement to Fernando Alonso?
Yes. I think...
Apparently, he and Ocon do not get along.
I've heard that. I've heard they're not very close.
They used to be good friends, and then apparently Ocon was being very arsey and over some incidents, and they just do not get along. Apparently, when Gasly made his debut at Malaysia in 2017, Ocon was asked about it on French TV, and he was like, as long as he stays out my way. And
that tells quite a lot.
Go on, Adam.
You know, it's there's something that makes sense there. There's something about, you know, the French team and the French driver reuniting, and if they're on the upward trend and they're looking for someone who's a proven race winner who really wants to prove himself somewhere in a team that may value him, maybe that's the team that would be perfect for him. And maybe Renault made a little bit of a mistake bringing Fernando Alonso in and not putting or trying to sign Pierre Gasly instead. I think there's not many places on the grid that Pierre Gasly could go which would provide him with, a competitive team and maybe the team that's right for him. And yeah, something about Alpine and Gasly feels right. And maybe while Ocon is a part of it, maybe it's not the right team, but maybe if Ocon went to pastures new, maybe it would be. Yes. Yeah.
It's something I really wanted to say, but I'll let James speak. Just go on.
I seem to remember, I don't know, I can't remember where I heard this, so it may be entirely untrue, so don't put too much into it. But I think that Gasly was joined to the Red Bull team kind of at the suggestion of Renault, when Renault and Red Bull were obviously engine partners at the time, but he stuck with Red Bull even after the split. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him at Alpine. They seem to think quite highly of him, and he deputised for Sebastian Buemi at the Formula E team in 2017.
The E-Dams team.
Yeah, so it's, yeah. But yeah, I think if he did get the call up to Red Bull for next year and was able to carry on these kind of performances, get podiums at the very least, another couple of race wins if possible, it certainly wouldn't do anything bad for his reputation. And I could really see the Gasly that we're seeing at the moment being the kind of driver that if Carlos Sainz didn't work out Ferrari, for example, they could say, why don't we give this guy a try? Or if Lewis Hamilton left Mercedes and they thought, we've got George Russell in one seat, why not give Pierre Gasly a go? I think he's certainly the kind of person that if Red Bull isn't the right environment for him long term, he's certainly doing himself enough credit to open opportunity somewhere else.
I do want to mention, first of all, regarding the fact that Gasly was even put in GP2 in the first place. Famously, Red Bull have always tried to avoid GP2/Formula 2. In fact, their current two Red Bull-backed drivers in F2 right now are not even in there because of the majority of money that they're being funded with is by Red Bull. In fact, Yuki Tsunoda, he might be an AlphaTauri driver next year if he finishes in the top four. He's backed by Honda. Honda, obviously, their engine suppliers. And then you've got Jehan Daruvala, who's just backed by his own family. But back before Gasly went into GP2/Formula 2, it was obviously all the drivers went through World Series by Renault. And the fact that they were so sure to put Gasly into GP2, you've got to think then surely Red Bull must have had belief in him. And they're now in a spot now where they're really having to sort of like weigh up all their options. And could Gasly really, if Helmut Marko pulls him into his office, but all right, Pierre, we are going to put you in the Red Bull for whenever, like not even the next year, like even for next week. And could he be all like, no, you're all right?
That's an interesting point. How much autonomy does Gasly have in that say? Is he contractually obliged to go straight up if he's asked? I don't know that. I saw an interview with Gasly sometime after the race where he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he would be ready to go back to Red Bull if the call came. So I think I think I'm in the same boat as you. Seeing how well Carlos did when he left the Red Bull program out on his own, I think it would be in Pierre's best interest to do exactly the same. And I don't think he would get the same treatment that he would get at AlphaTauri at Red Bull. Yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think Pierre's obliged to go up to Red Bull if he's called?
I think from what I know, or what I've heard at least about Red Bull contracts, I don't think they get much of a say. Yeah, that's the problem with the idea of Gasly going somewhere else, is that Red Bull contracts are famously quite watertight. I think Red Bull tend to have sort of the right of first refusal over all the drivers in their stable. So if someone like Alpine, for example, came calling, I think they'd have to wait for Red Bull to say no, we don't want him next year, which is tough. I remember Ricciardo in 2018 when he was out of contract with Red Bull seemed quite excited by the idea that he was finally able to decide for himself what he was doing. Yeah, it seemed like a really big deal. And I can imagine when you're in that program from the age of 16, 17 or something like that, as a lot of these drivers are, that must be quite a big deal when you get to like your 20s and you think, I can actually decide what I want to do next year for myself now. Yeah, I can't imagine he'd have much say if they wanted to put him into the senior team. I imagine it would be very much, here's your new shirt, come down to Milton Keynes.
Speaking of all that, though, we were talking last year, well, not specifically, I joined only this year, but collectively F1 fans were talking about how Albon was talking about him being in the Red Bull team, Gasly being demoted, and now we're here 12 months later talking about a complete and utter switcheroo of that. And since we are talking about the environment of Red Bull, I know for a fact that Alex Albon is I don't know for a fact, obviously, I've met the guy, but from secondhand accounts, he seems like the sort of guy that does very much need that support as well. And we saw the race, he actually had a collision with Gasly, and that kind of ruined some of the underfloor aerodynamics of his car. And he very much struggled in pretty much the back of the whole race. Like, I'm worried now that he's going to end up being the driver that we speak about as being demoted, and can he ever get his mojo back? I think we've now seen with Gasly, the fact that he's gone and won a Grand Prix with AlphaTauri, that this redemption arc is possible. We all seem to think back when Kvyat was demoted that it was the beginning of the end. It sort of was. He left the team after 2017, got brought back for 2019, and now we're looking at him being rid of again for 2021, replaced by Yuki Tsunoda. Just chopping and changing. With Red Bull go through drivers like hearing it go through wives. Yes, James?
Yeah, with Albon, I wrote a piece earlier in the year when he was having a run of a couple bad results, wrote a piece saying that he wasn't in the same danger as Gasly was last year, which I don't think has aged particularly well since then. Yeah, he did have some sort of deceptively good results, I think, at the start of the year, like his 4th place in Styria and his 5th place in Hungary, coming after some drives back through the field. But now he's on less than half the points of Verstappen, and he did have the damage in the race in Italy. But there have been a few races where he's kind of got stuck behind cars that he shouldn't have got stuck behind, which is the problem Gasly was having last year. Yeah, you've got to... I feel for him because this is such a good opportunity for him, and he has put in some really great performances. But it does just feel like things are starting to come undone for him now. And when you've got the combination of that with then Gasly, not just putting in a good result, but winning a Grand Prix in a midfield car. And I think if, there's probably a lot of people kicking themselves after Monza. But I think Alex Albon's probably one of them, because if you told him at the start of the year there was going to be a Grand Prix where Hamilton was going to be sent to the back of the field, Bottas was going to be stuck in 5th, 6th place with a car that potentially had problems with it, and Verstappen was going to retire. Yeah?
Gasly's just been called up to Red Bull. I'm looking on my phone.
You're joking.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Are we breaking the news?
No, I'm joking.
Ah.
I wanted to get you. I'm sorry, guys. This is going to be
so cruel. I bet it's going to happen tomorrow now.
That's...
It's Monday.
Wow.
If the news comes out by tomorrow, and this podcast will be out probably about Friday. No, okay. Sorry, Adam. You look like you wanted to say something. Have I ruined it?
No, it's all right. I didn't know if James you had wanted to finish, but I think the thing with Albon is he needs to improve on his qualifying. Once he improves on his qualifying, then he won't put himself in the positions where he's having to fight his way through the pack. But interestingly, at Monza, it was probably one of the closest margins in qualifying that we've had from Verstappen and Albon in a long time. I think it was 0.3, I want to say. And consistently, it's been much more than that. So I think he just needs to work on this qualifying. And if he can get himself to potentially a 10th behind Verstappen, or, even a 10th and a half, maybe he'll put himself in 4th or 5th regularly and not in 6th and 7th and 8th, which puts him in a detrimental position in terms of strategy. Doesn't, it makes him lose his tyres halfway through the race and makes every problem that he has exponentially worse. And I think I want to say that he can get better. I want to say that he can get better, but I don't know if he can. And I hope he does prove us wrong. Yeah, I think he knows how to overtake. We can see he's proved his racecraft at times. No, you know, the Hamilton overtakes. Don't shout at me. Don't hit me. But yeah, let's just see if he can. I think it's the qualifying. That's purely it. But interestingly, the talk about Albon, like, you know, what we saw from Bottas today, you know, is he? I got a similar feeling how I'm getting with Albon now, which is he is just seemingly nowhere, and he's putting himself right down the pack where he doesn't need to be, and he's not providing that rear gunner position that he should be as the self-prescribed or a second-hand prescribed second driver. But he also is in a bit of a precarious position now, and I don't think I've ever seen Bottas in ever this low. I don't think I've ever seen Bottas this far off Hamilton.
Yeah, I do actually want to bring up that. I feel like we've probably done it in a bit of a bad order, but the fact is that I think after yesterday's race, we call it Valtteri Bottles, not Valtteri Bottas, because he bottled this race hugely. He was, that first lap, it reminded me, I think it was either America last year, it was definitely America last year, but I seem to remember Vettel also did a really bad start in Monza last year as well. But definitely America, he just got overtaken left, right and centre. He was being hounded. And I think this is the one race where I think it will change a lot of people's opinions about whether Bottas is good enough for that Mercedes drive. Because up until now, he has sort of definitely provided a very stable, consistent platform to be Hamilton's teammate. And this one race just kind of proved that he was just nowhere near good enough almost. And it's easy for me to say. Because if you think about it, Bottas was fifth. Hamilton, after being 23 seconds off of the second to last driver, still ended up seventh. His gap between first and second now is completely the same. Yes, James.
Yeah, I agree with you both on that. Like, this is a race that Bottas will not be able to look back on and be satisfied with in any way. I remember when I watched that first lap, saw him get overtaken by Sainz, then Norris, then everyone else behind. I was watching it, I was thinking there must be something wrong with the car. There must be some mechanical problem. There must be something wrong with the tyres, something, because he just wasn't able to put up any defence. And he was on the radio saying he thinks he had a puncture, and the team was saying, no, the tyre pressures are fine. And I'm still surprised now that there's not been anything from the team saying, yeah, he had a problem with a sensor or something wrong with a floor or a crack somewhere, because I don't know how you can have the definitively fastest car on the grid and be passed by that many cars on the opening lap and not be able to do anything about it, not be able to recover those positions. I think Adam had a good point. He just looks, quite demoralized at the moment. And obviously it's an impossible task going up against six-time world champion, one of the statistically greatest drivers in history. But I wonder if that is just kind of now getting on top of him, that this is his fourth year alongside Hamilton, and he's never been able to do that, never been able to put that big a dent in what Hamilton's been able to do in his title campaigns. I wonder if that is just now getting on top of him, that he's thinking, yeah, even if I don't want to admit I'm the second driver, I am the second driver in this team.
Yeah, I mean, the start was absolutely unreal, but I want to just point on the fact that Lance Stroll on the restart of the standing start, if you will.
I was about to get onto that, actually.
Okay. I don't know if I want to say it then. I might.
No, I'll run through it all. So basically, yeah. Lance Stroll had the safety car restart and it not been red flagged. Stroll would have had to have pitted to fulfill his mandatory stop. But he never ended up doing that. And as a result of the red flag, this was something that I remember back in Monaco 2011, Vettel and Alonso looked like they were going to have to go into the pits perhaps if Button might have actually got them. But Stroll essentially got handed almost a podium on a plate, if not a win on the plate, had he not bottled the start. And I mean, Stroll, obviously, he put in a lot of good moves and he was very consistent with what he had. So even though we gave him a lot of shtick for being, a daddy's boy and a pay driver and all that, he still did very well. But Lando Norris said after the race that he would have got a podium if Stroll hadn't been given this advantage on a plate. And you've just got to think, he has a point. I mean, you may call him salty, but Lando Norris is right. Because at that point, sorry, Adam, we'll get to you in a bit here. I am talking a lot. You've got you got this safety car period in which you have to try and find an advantage. And if you don't take that, you should probably, not get rewarded for mitigating circumstances, allowing you to change your tyres. So yeah, I do agree on this whole rule needs to be changed. Go on, Adam.
I have a couple of points. One
Go on.
was that wasn't what I was going to say. What I was going to say was I've got a feeling that the second position on the grid was potentially less grippy, because I think Lance Stroll was reporting that from his starting position he encountered not a lot of grip, so he had a really bad getaway. Anyway, that's less of a point. The second point I wanted to make was Lance Stroll has he always does seem to sort of luck into these positions recently. And remember,
he's fourth in the championship right now. He does not belong there.
But so was it, at Spa, Perez was running in front of him, and then he got the penalty, which put Stroll in front of Perez.
Racing Point favour Stroll confirmed.
Yeah, and Perez missed out on 2 races due to coronavirus, and somehow I think Stroll is sort of getting handed these positions on a plate, and this race was no exemption to the fact. I don't understand how a driver can just, while everyone else has taken that, he effectively did the race without pitting, which is what Lando Norris said in one of his interviews. And I'm not really a Lando fan, so I don't see it as that I wanted Norris to get the podium as opposed to Stroll. But
neither do I. It could have been someone I don't like.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather have somebody fought for that position fairly and not. The thing with Stroll is he could have won that race, but he ended up finishing behind both Pierre Gasly and Carlos Sainz. So he got a third, but really, did he do that well this race? Did he underperform? There's so many points there that I've just made that I can't answer them all. But if anyone else wants to answer any of those, go ahead. But yeah,
James, you got any?
Yeah, I think with the fact that it was just the one driver who managed to get this advantage, it's I wonder if the response would have been different if it was lots of other people down the grid who also got a free pit stop. But I don't know, part of me thinks, sometimes in Formula One you just get unlucky and you get lucky, but then equally, this isn't the same as somebody else running over some debris and getting a puncture and you gaining a position from that. I don't know, it wasn't sort of to do with the strategy call from the team, I don't think.
It's to do with the regulations.
Yeah, because I remember when Grosjean did the same thing in 2016 in Australia and got Haas's first points. I thought that was quite a good call from their strategy engineer, just to leave the stop as late as possible, kind of anticipating a safety car or something. But I don't think that's what Racing Point were doing yesterday. So it does feel like like Adam said, he was just kind of gifted it, just sort of lucked into the position.
I don't know if this was anything to do with it, but was the reason that Stroll stayed out in the first place, was it because that they had a really slow stop with Perez and they couldn't double stack the car, so they eventually left Stroll out for a lap? I heard.
Possibly.
I don't know.
Oh no! Somewhere. Wait. No, you might be right actually.
Yeah, I can't remember what the Perez stop was like. I don't remember seeing that one.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was slow. Yeah, I remember now. It was slow. They had difficulty removing his rear right, I think.
Yeah.
I might be wrong,
but yeah, I don't know if the rule should be changed or whether it needs to be adapted in some way. Like, if you are going to change your tires, maybe you should incur some sort of not a penalty, but maybe, just spitballing here. Maybe you have to start from the pit lane, or you have some other thing that you have to contend with.
Starting from the pit lane is a penalty, though, in itself.
Yes, that's been completely harsh on Stroll here, but I mean, but then again, you are allowed to change like for like parts in in that situation, you're allowed to change damage. So, you know, arguably you should be maybe allowed to change damaged tires if the logic there is similar. So,
because
I
if
don't
you
know.
had something like front wing damage, you'd obviously be able to change that when that would have cost you a pit stop in the race. Yeah. I don't know if the rule needs changing or if it's just kind of in this situation. I don't know. It worked for Stroll and not for anyone else, but maybe that's just Formula One.
Yeah.
Well, we have burned through a lot of topics. I said it was about 10 or 15 minutes into the podcast that we'd be here a long time. I think we've been recording for an hour now, if I'm not mistaken. So, at risk of this going on too long and us just blabbering on for the sake of it, I think we'll end the episode. Thank you, gentlemen. Actually, before we stop, we got to think of a driver of the day. Adam, I know yours already, Carlos Sainz. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. No, you're not wrong. For me, it is Carlos Sainz, and you know, it is. You know, everyone would say that it's because I'm a fan, but I do honestly believe that he would have finished P2 regardless. He had a fantastic start off the line. You know, his reaction times this season, and we've seen last season, have been amazing. And yesterday was no exception. And not only did he have to, you know, not only was he within 0.4 of that win, he had to fight back to get to that position in the first place. And he overtook Raikkonen in spectacular fashion and Stroll in spectacular fashion. So I'm not taking anything away from Gasly's performance. If I could pick two, they would be both my driver of the day, but I'm going to have to be the typical fanboy and go with my guy. But yeah, what it is.
Fine, James, you next.
I agree with you, Adam. I think, Sainz didn't just luck into it. He was a legitimate P3 in the grid and then P2 in the race. For the sake of contrast, though, I'll go with Gasly. I know it's a bit basic, but I don't know. He thoroughly deserved that win, and I think he thoroughly deserves all the accolades that are being heaped on him at the moment.
Yeah, I honestly, I voted Gasly driver of the day in the F1 official poll. I also want to give a shout out to Hamilton for the fact that he was able to be essentially a pit stop behind second to last and still finish seventh for the fastest lap is incredible. But I do have, honestly, now I'm thinking about it, Carlos Sainz was incredible because you got to remember Gasly started third, and the way he was able to get into that position off the start was literally him pulling away and out-dragging Stroll and then Hamilton getting a penalty. Sainz really fought through the field in that second part of the race. He was really royally screwed, and he was behind a lot of people who really sort of looked out by pitting before the safety car. He really fought for it. So, and the fact that he ended up 4 tenths behind, even though as a McLaren fan, I wanted Sainz to win, but as someone who just knew all the stuff that Gasly went through, I wanted him to win. I was going to win either way, one or the other. And the only way it would really have worked for me completely is if Gasly had won for McLaren. And obviously that's not happening. But yeah, I am sort of going half and half between these two. I think I can tell you who the true winners were, the fans. And for the fact that I have made a wholesome moment in a podcast that no one listens to anyway, I'm going to hell. Bye.
Just want to make it. Yeah, no, it's going to be a fantastic Drive to Survive episode, isn't it? It's going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be
apparently
brilliant.
Netflix are in the Ferrari garage this weekend. I imagine that'll be very fun for them.
There was a meme. There was a meme I saw. My friend Alkia actually posted it, and it aged like fine wine. It was Tifosi 2019. It was when they gather up on the grid with the big Ferrari flag things, that they hold out like that. Tifosi 2020, the same, just with Alpha Tauri's logo posted. And I'm just that could not have aged better. The fact that it is funny as hell.
Brilliant.
You would not have thought they'd be the top Italian team, would you?
No.
I mean, there's only two. I think Jensen Button misidentified Alfa Romeo as. I know the Alfa Romeo brand is Italian, but because the team is still registered as Swiss because of Sauber, that counts as officially. It's half and half. We'll go with that.
It's probably just as well they won, because all the Italian media are going to be talking today about how AlphaTauri won and not about how Ferrari lost. So,
Yeah, Ferrari
yeah.
might be happy with that.
yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, it is Ferrari that sort of helped win the race for AlphaTauri because Leclerc crashed, and soon
Yeah.
we're going to be putting on our tinfoil hat and conspiracy theories about Leclerc was like, oh, if I crash now, Gasly will win. Bye bye. Let's hope no one thinks. Oh, mind you, some F1 fans are deranged. All right, now properly ending the episode this time. Thank you very much for listening to our debrief. We will be back next week for the Tuscan Grand Prix debrief. Now I'm going to ask my esteemed colleagues for if they want to hand out their social medias. So, James, you go first.
I'm on Twitter at James16Matthews.
Adam, do you want to?
Yep. I'm at Wheeler_deals.
The reason why I was a bit hesitant to ask you is because when we did the Indy 500 episode, you didn't actually do it. I was like, oh, maybe he doesn't want to put his socials out there.
I completely forgot. I was just so engrossed in being the host that I asked you guys, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to do mine.
Like, immediately as you stop recording.
Yeah.
And I am Red Luca 56. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. We will see you out on track.